All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the West Sessos Milwaukee School Board to order. Mr. Keller, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I sure will.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Sikich,
Present.
Miss Steele. Here. Mr. Burns,
Present.
Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser. Here. Mrs. Carr. Here. Mrs. Lee. Here. Mr. Keller,
Here.
President Lee.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
No changes this evening.
Okay, then we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Great. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We'll start with 6.1 legislative update. So Governor Evers announces more budget listening sessions. So Governor Tony Evers announced upcoming locations and dates to continue a statewide Doing the Right Thing listening session tour, including another virtual listening session, as well as visits to Wausau, Superior, and Eau Claire. And all of that information is there and available online if people want to register for those, either in person or the virtual. The virtual is Wednesday, January 11th, so this Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then top research findings for 2022 include the state's fall in school spending to below national average. So Wisconsin falls to the middle of the pack in school spending. Given that state and local taxes are the primary funding source for K-12 education, the decline in Wisconsin school spending rank was consistent with its declining tax burden measured by the ratio of state and local taxes to personal income, which fell from 5th in the US in 2022 to 23rd in 2019. And then in 6.2, the Board of Education recognitions. First, I'd like to thank Steve Cosner and our Sodexo team for their adaptability during the recent power outages on January 4th. They stayed committed to making sure our students got lunch. Some of it was breakfast items, but everybody was fed at schools where we lost power. I'd also like to thank all of our school leaders, custodians, everybody that was flexible during the power disruption. You know, it was a really kind of touchy moment where we were trying to decide, do we close schools? Do we keep operating? But the reality was, the whole west side was out. So if we close schools, we're sending kids home to houses without power. So at the end, we thought, let's keep them in school as long as we can, figure it out lunch, and everybody really was adaptable and flexible, and it worked out fine for us. And then from our athletic directors, Justin Marion at Central, the following student athletes were recognized in the Woodland all conference teams for the fall. I'm not going to list all the names of the students. And then similarly cite all the names of the students. Similarly, Greg Lucas at Hale, the athletic director. Students were recognized on the Greater Metro all conference teams for the fall. Remember, the two high schools are in two different athletic conferences. But what it does is it really proves that our athletic programs are thriving. Students are making the all conference teams for the fall sports, and we'll see the same again during the winter and spring. I just want to congratulate all of the coaches, all of the athletes, and everybody that works to support athletics. And again, recognizing the all conference teams for the fall. And then 6.3, just some brief updates. There was one comment at a regular school board meeting on December 19th, and it was Mr. Broadwell, but he made comments that were similar to others that have already been responded to. So I have nothing more to add there. A little bit of school consolidation update. So we continue to develop more and more detailed plans as we move forward with the 3 school consolidations for Madison, Longfellow, and Lane. And there's kind of 3 big areas of consolidation that the plans really focus on. It really is, and we've talked about these things before, but it bears repeating. What happens to the people? What happens to all the stuff, right? And then what happens to the buildings, right? So those are the 3 big things that we're working on. And I shared this in a little more detail last week at the PTA council meeting, and I received kind of an interesting question about the stuff that's in schools. And schools are notorious for collecting and shoving things in closets and basements. And so there's a lot of stuff that comes when you start really kind of digging into a school. But the plan is there's going to be kind of this cascading reality of what happens to the stuff. The main things will be identified as we get towards the end of the school year and as soon as school is out. And that's going to be managed through a moving company. So we'll make all the main moves of what needs to come out of those buildings. So the best equipment, the best furniture that would then go into a school that's receiving more students. So for Walker or Pershing, for example, but then Walker and Pershing may have older equipment or older furniture they'd like to get rid of. So now we have another step in the process. And then there may be things at the end of those two steps that other teachers in our school district might like to have in their classrooms. And so then there'll be a kind of internal rummage sale of sorts, not really a sale, just if you're interested, put your name on it and tag it. And then Steve Eichmann and I talked about this today, is just start moving things. But there too, there may be 10 things that come out of buildings. And the question from the PTA council member was really at the end, what happens with what's left, right? So we're envisioning kind of, the multipurpose room at Madison, the gym at Lane is just filled with all of the things that then at the end, nobody wanted as a result of the transition. And her question was, would you give it to nonprofits? I was like, wow, we never even considered that. So it was a great question to get. So that's going to become part of our plan. We have to figure out how to do that, dispose of district property properly in terms of funding sources and other rules that govern those kind of things, but we'll work through that. And I think ultimately we want to see things that still have value and can be used, especially in not-for-profit environments where they're even more strapped for furnishings than maybe we are, to make those things available. So that's really kind of a long explanation to answer that question that, oh, that's a really good thing that somebody brought that up. So we're going to work that into the plan. And then last update. So next week is the state education convention. So that's really for school boards and school district leaders. It's downtown at the big convention center. And I'm highlighting it this evening because we have a number of our student-led businesses that are going to be presenting and marketing and selling at the convention. And this is new. So students directly engaged. It's part of their learning experience, but it's also part of us telling our story well. So I encourage you, if you're going to attend the conference, to try to find those students and really support them. I also want to thank Deidre and her team for organizing and pulling this off. That's quite a bit of an undertaking to move all those students and their things and the teachers back and forth. But I think it'll showcase the work we're doing really well. So I'd encourage anybody that's attending the conference to find our kids and support them. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 7, our public comments for this evening. As a reminder, if you'd like to address the board, you have 3 minutes to do so. Please start by stating your name and your address. There will not be any back and forth discussion, but if there's a simple question that could be answered at the time from the person who's providing the comments, and we can provide that information immediately after, we will do so. Otherwise, any additional response will be provided by the next regular Board of Education meeting. For anyone attending via Zoom, there is a link in the chat to be able to sign up to provide comments to the board. So right now we have 1 person signed up, Ms. Deandra Quick.
Can I give one of these to each of the board members?
Yep.
Just in case I don't finish it.
Certainly.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Go ahead. Hi, my name is Deandra Quick. My address is 3226 South 106th Street. I have been a custodian for over 10 years at General Mitchell Elementary School. I am here on behalf of the custodians for the West Dallas School District. I want to bring some concerns to the board, as a lot of us are becoming very frustrated with how we are being treated. We are 12-month employees, and it seems to be getting harder for us to get time off we have earned, and feel that the new rules and policies really need to be looked at. We have brought our concerns to multiple management levels, and it seems we have gotten nowhere. And we were also told by our upper management team, if we don't like it, go to the board. So that's why I'm here tonight. Are you aware of what some of the custodians and cleaners are doing in order to make sure that there is coverage at the schools? As an example, my school was staffed without a cleaner for over a year and a half. In that time, I've stepped up to the plate in regards to covering my shift, which starts at 6:30 in the morning. I run the after-school program, and then I assist the cleaners at night when we are shorthanded. I do it as I take pride in my building, and I love what I do. but the management is bringing us down. Why can't we get people hired? Some custodians are trying to do what they can and others not too much. Just recently, at the end of December, one of my cleaners stepped up to the plate to take on the extra position at Mitchell. The district offered him 7 hours with benefits through a contract until the end of the school year of 2023. Then he loses his benefits and goes back to 5 hours in hopes they find another cleaner at the beginning of the year. I asked why, if this cleaner who puts 100% and is willing to do this shift permanently, why not make this position permanent? Why are we not trying to retain the good workers? I asked what can be done to help assist everyone, as we are all extremely frustrated with these new policies in place and the lack of communication in certain things with our management team. Back in August of 2022, it was brought to our attention that we as maintenance will no longer be able to take off the last week of summer and the first week of the new school year. I feel this is completely unfair. Every year for the last 10 years, I've taken off for my wedding anniversary on the 28th of August for a weekend getaway with my husband. This year, management and the board are telling me I can't take off. Last year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer on the 27th of August. These are two important dates to me. And I am being told I am going to be denied my vacation. I would like the board to really look at this policy, as we custodians should not be denied these days off if we have our buildings done and ready for the new school year and if approved by the principals. I ask, why did the board approve this policy without talking to the custodian maintenance staff?
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, I don't see anyone else that is signed up. In case someone joined in the Zoom late, I'll wait a few seconds here to let them sign up if they would like to address the board. All right, seeing no additional signups, I will close public comments at this time and move on to item 8, our board reports, starting with 8.1, a review of our board calendar. So today is Monday, January 9th at 6 p.m. We have a regular Board of Education meeting, and immediately followed we have a financial stability and efficiency workshop meeting, where we're talking about enrollment projections and open enrollment seats for our 23-24 school year. Then on Monday, January 16th at 6 p.m., we have a board workshop meeting with Melissa Matarazzo from Huron Consulting Group, talking about our strategic plan and a scorecard update. Then on Monday, January 23rd, we have our next regular Board of Education meeting. Immediately following, we have a closed session. And then time to be determined, just so the public and everyone else is aware, we will be starting our first round interviews for with the superintendent search firm in closed session, and those will be Monday, January 30th and the 31st, Tuesday as well. And then additionally in February, on Monday, February 6th and Tuesday, February 7th, that is when we're planning to have our second round interviews with the Board of Education, as well as the search firm being present as well. All right, moving on to 8.2, our committee reports, starting with 8.2.1, college and career readiness. Ms. Deal.
All right. So we met tonight, right before this meeting. The two things that we talked about was, we discussed the senior privilege option. So it's an incentive program that we want to offer to our seniors to improve attendance. This would be offered to seniors. Actually, we talked also about doing it with juniors, and so we thought it would be a good idea to provide the junior privilege option for the second semester of junior year, and then the senior privilege option would be the whole year, the whole senior year. But it would be basically offered to students who have academic success, excellent attendance, and appropriate behavior. They would be allowed to either start school late, so they'd come in after first hour, they'd end either at the end of the day, they'd leave after 7th hour, or they would get like a longer lunch hour with a study house, like a 90-minute kind of like break in the middle of the day. So we came up with, so Connie went over it with us and everything, and so that should be coming to the board to discuss further and see if we want to do that. I think on the 23rd at our next meeting. And then the other thing we discussed, this is just more informational, is that we're gonna have Hanover Research is going to do do a really comprehensive look at essentially looking at our project-based learning high schools and that experience as compared to our comprehensive high schools and that experience, and kind of basically looking at the numbers and saying, you know, what's going on, or project-based learning, you know, is it doing what we needed to do? It's the benefits of it. So yeah, so that will be, because it's going to be really comprehensive in Hanover. That's essentially, they're going to do it for us. It's going to take a couple months, but we should have it, I think, by the end of this school year, to have all that information. All right. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Steele or her committee regarding her report? Regarding the research for the PBL, is Hanover deciding on what parameters that they're going to be evaluating, or are we providing them that information?
We're providing them with, we're providing them with the information.
Okay, great. We're saying these are the things we'd
Yeah.
like to get some feedback on.
Exactly.
If
yeah.
we're seeing it, and we're comparing like apples to apples as far as PBL versus not PBL to see if we see a difference.
Yeah, basically.
Any items for consideration for Ms. Steele's committee in the future? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Steele. We'll move on to item 8.2.2, employee engagement and culture. Mr. Keller.
All right, we met on 12/20. It was a pretty short meeting. We had two topics that we briefly discussed. One was parental leave, and we discussed a draft policy for that. And then we went over some EEO numbers from our EEO report in terms of diversity within our staff. And we've made some slight improvements in that area. And then we're scheduled to meet again on 117.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Keller or the committee regarding his report? Or future items for consideration on the agenda? Seeing none, that concludes our board reports. Moving on to 8.3 board member reports of community events. I know I want to welcome everyone back from the holiday break that we had. I hope everyone had a wonderful time visiting family and friends and celebrating the holidays together. So I'm not sure if there were any additional events. Oh, Ms. Carr.
I did. So I attended a varsity basketball game at Hale. And I have to say, I had not been to one since my kids were on the basketball team, and it was just as stressful as I remember. We played Tosa West and we lost in the last second of the game by 1 bucket. But wow, they were a wonderfully cohesive team, and it was such a delight to watch them. I obviously you know, I'm so not a competitive person, so I'm all about, you know, get your heart rate up and be a good sport type of thing. You know, I'm really, so I was watching just around, and I have to say that I was so pleased and proud with the student section and the way that they cheered and rooted the team on. And I also really made note of the coaches and what wonderful role models they were for the kids, and the way that they carried themselves. And I just thought it was a wonderful experience. I am going to be going to more games. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Carr. Anyone else have anything they would like to report back on for events they may have been able to attend between our last meeting and now?
The only thing I would like to say is I was able to attend the Longfellow meeting on December 20th and I just wanted to say thank you for those, the community members that showed up. I thought it was really productive. We got a lot of really good information out of it. And I think there's also will be a community meeting then, just as a reminder, on January 31st for Madison Elementary. So I encourage people in that neighborhood, or even just in general, if you're just interested in knowing what we're thinking about, how we want to use the building or how we should use the building, bring your ideas. So.
Right, that was a community information session.
Yep.
At Longfellow to try to get some input, and there were student suggestions that were presented at that
Yep.
as well, correct? Right.
Yep.
That they
Yeah,
had come
but it
up with,
was,
so.
yeah.
All right, anything else? Mr. Becker.
Friday afternoon, I went to it was Shared Journeys and Deeper Learning Virtual Academy, they had their lunch event, so they had a food truck set up. There were about a dozen of them, and I'm happy to say I hit all of them.
Oh.
Took my wife for a really cheap date and got my fill. It was great. It was a really nice event. Kids did a nice job. The presentations were good. It was really nice vibe. Had an opportunity to speak with a parent as well, who was just describing her daughter's experience at the school. So it's good. Nice event.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Becker. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much for those who shared out, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more events to attend coming up here now, moving into the new year. So move on to 8.4, other updates and information items. So this is the time where I like to give a little update on our superintendent search. So we did mention during the board review of the calendar, some upcoming events with our first round and second round interviews being scheduled. And we also will be having a meeting with Rain Associates to go over those things as well and discuss the candidates that we have completed applications for. So just an update on that. So as of last week, Wednesday, we had 14 completed applications from Alaska, California, Wisconsin, Illinois, Mississippi, Maryland, Texas, Michigan, and New York. And we have 2 additional applications which are pending, so not completed yet. And Rain Associates mentioned that's probably their letters of recommendation they're waiting to come in, that were from Montana as well. So looks like we'll be getting from a diverse geographical locations as well, at least for the applications that we received. And so looking forward to the next steps of those and seeing what sort of applicants we got.
Noah, do we have a date on when we will be meeting with Rain Associates? Would it be a separate date from the days of the round interviews?
Yes, so I believe that will be the 23rd. All right, so that's all that I have for that update. So we'll move on to item 9, our consent agenda for this evening, starting with item 9.1, the approval of the board minutes from our December 19th meeting. 9.2, our employment summary, and 9.3, our supplementary contracts. Does anyone need anything separated out? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Then move on to item 10, our action items, starting with 10.1. Approve updated board policy 4162 as a second reading. Ms. Marshall.
Good evening. This is the second reading of a policy that was approved by the Employee Engagement and Culture Board Committee on November 15th. And we had a first reading with the board on November the 28th. So
Any changes between those 2 readings?
no, not at all.
No changes. Any questions from the board? No questions? I'd look for
Motion to approve.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Thank you for being here. and Happy New Year.
So excited.
All right, let's move on to 10.2, our ROSB resolutions. So that's me, Ms. Kaiser, and Mr. Sikich. So everyone was emailed the resolutions that we put forth to that we would be having our delegate vote on. And so do we have, and is there any preamble else other than that? No. Okay. So I just want to make sure before I just do it. Any questions, comments, concerns about the resolutions that were put forth? We're all right with it, so we're okay directing our delegate to vote in favor of those resolutions. We take official action on that, right? Yeah. we have to. All right, so if no questions, no
Second.
discussions, okay, motion from Ms. Kaiser, second from Mr. Burns. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Okay, we'll move right into our workshop this evening. 11.1 enrollment projections in open enrollment seats for 23-24. Mr. Norris and Ms. Bergman, unless you need some time to set up. Take that as a no.
I was gonna hand out some folders.
I just collect them for fun now.
Thank you so much. Welcome and happy new year.
Yeah, thank you too. Appreciate it.
Just pull this up.
Back again. Tonight's presentation is a little less than 50 slides, so keep this one short.
49. Appreciate it.
I think we have 16, so we'll go through them. This is kind of an annual item that we've done the last 5 or 6 years. So this evening, to kind of help get the visuals kind of in your hands, Connie put together a nice packet that shows some of the slides tonight. So everything you'll see in your packet is going to be in the presentation, and we'll just better help everyone either online or in person here tonight kind of get a better picture of kind of how the process goes to determine staffing. And we look at enrollment, how we project the process for that, and then ultimately how that process leads us to the end, which is determining open enrollment seats. So we'll go through that. And with me tonight is Connie Bergman, Manager of School Services.
Hello.
And so Connie's put a lot of work in the presentation tonight and the numbers. So we'll go through them and feel free to ask questions along the way. So with that, we're going to just jump right in. And at each point, when we get through to a slide where you have something in front of you, we'll stop and point it out so you can pull it out. So kind of the objectives overview of the presentation is to determine or describe the enrollment projection process used for the following school year, outline what our enrollment looks like, district-wide and by school, and then how the projection impacts staffing. So projecting the enrollment, and then district-wide by school, and then how do we determine staff based on that projection? And then lastly, as I mentioned before, taking that projection, kind of how we determine open enrollment seats based on the projection, the staffing analysis, and then the number of seats by grade. So the enrollment projection process, how that works is a couple different pieces to that. Is one, just looking at what our current enrollment is through Friday. Very, very logical, rolling up the students in grades 6 to 7, 7 to 8, exiting seniors. And then what we do, and what's really helped us in the budgeting process, is the more exact we can be with our third Friday count, which is enrollment, has a big impact on our membership, which is what we receive federal or state funding for. So the closer we can be with that, the better we are in terms of budgeting and practices like that. So the last 3 or 4 years we've done this, maybe even going back 5, we've been within 1 or 2% of the projection, which has been great, which allows us to be as close as we can in terms of budgeting, and the reason why we've had surpluses, things like in past years. So the last piece of the projection is making analysis around transition grades. So we know as a district from 8th to 9th grade, we always see an uptick in enrollment. And that historically is because students that go to private schools or open enroll out come back, because to be very honest, private schools are expensive to run at the high school because there's athletics, there's tech classes, there's shops, right? Things like that. So we see families coming back for those things. We see increases in K-4 to kindergarten. That's going to be more families based on legally having to enroll their kids in school. So there's options there. So simply rolling the students over would not get us in line with where we're going to be. So taking historical data, which we'll get into in a second to show you kind of how we get that, is really the last piece with enrollment projection. So the CAS 4 process is removing the seniors, each grade's advanced. Adjustments each year are made based on historical numbers. So we'll look at, like I mentioned, 9th grade, we see an increase. So over the last 5 years, we've seen around 15 to 20% increase. 6th grade, there's a bit of a decrease there. So not really a ton, 2% there. And then kindergarten, like I mentioned before, a large increase there as well, with families being required to attend school at that age. And then our projected enrollment and next year's open enrollment, right, represents 92% of the planned enrollment, which means that we have 8%. We do not staff each staff member for 8% of the enrollment, which allows us to have flexibility in all of our schools for, if 2 families move into Madison's neighborhood, where they have to have room in the school for them. That's part of neighborhood school. So without that flexibility, we can have problems with that. So this is the process we use for that. So this slide is in your folder. It looks like this, and it just gives you a better picture of what this is. So
I won't spend too much time on it, but just so you get a sense of it. So this is the 5-year enrollment projection, and on the left, so on the very left side is going to be class of, you can see the column there. And so you can work your way down. And so in yellow are going to be our high school students, in green are going to be our intermediate, and in blue are going to be elementary. So when you kind of hone in here, if you get to the actual 22-23, that's going to be our actual third Friday count enrollment, which is different than our membership, right? Membership is what we receive funding based on, but our enrollment is by school. So as you look between 22-23, which is our actual, and 23-24, which is our projection, you can see this year's junior class, which is 637 students. As you look across it linear horizontally, you can see that becomes our next year's senior class. And so as you get down to the bottom here, you can see the total kind of third Friday enrollment total for this is 7161. Our actual enrollment for that was 7239. It does not include PK students. And those are 3K students that we're required to educate through a disability status. So that is not included in here. So that's why those numbers are different, 7161 and 7239. But you can see next year that our projected enrollment, the decrease is under 100 students. So our blip of enrollments, these massive declines, has really started to level out, which is really consistent with why we've been discussing school consolidation, because we have enough data to project themes among where our numbers are going to be. So the last thing I want to mention here, if you look at this column 23-24, you can see, and this is what I really want to point to, our high school next year, our high school enrollment, each class is in the 600s, all the yellow columns, the yellow cells, 637, 635, 667, and 621. So you can see our intermediate school behind it though, every class is in the 400s. So when that intermediate group becomes high school, that's when like the end of the enrollment decline is really, it'll be more of like this every year, up and down, big class comes in, it'll be up and down. So really that's where, when we talked about, consolidating 2 high schools, that's when that becomes realistic, when the 6th grade class is probably a sophomore. So 3 or 4 years from now, that becomes a realistic option in one school. But that I think gives a good picture of kind of where we're at, but then you can look back to see where we've come from too. So, 18-19, we were at 8,000 students, 8,100, and we're down about 1,000 students over a year.
Just one point of clarification. You mentioned that sophomore, 6th graders being sophomores being the realistic time where we could consolidate. That's with doing nothing to the school that we would consolidate to, correct?
It becomes possible given the total number of students. So,
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
Yep. So this is kind of another graph. This kind of highlights the point of like what I mentioned before with the high school students being the 600s, and you can see the rest of the chart is really level in terms of a regression line. So our high school class, when those students exit, you can see the regression line for that becomes very linear as opposed to a decline, I suppose. So this is kind of a better picture to show that story a bit. And this is just a highlighted version of the bottom of your chart, so we can keep going through that. We talked about that. So one of the things I like to do is to kind of try to analyze, where from last year's projection to this year's actuals, where were we off and what were the grades? Because sometimes that can tell a story. And we certainly saw that with COVID and, families keeping students home at earlier grades and high school not seeing the decline. That's where, things like that. So it was pretty. If you look here, the first column here, projected enrollment, I believe this is in the packet too.
This is in the packet.
Yeah, it looks like.
Projection is at the top.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. So this just shows, the reason I think it's important to show is one, it shows how close we were in the projection. So this year, we projected 7239. It came in at 7161. So, 70 students, it's a lot, but 70 students over 7,000 students is 1%. So we're really, I think, really doing a good job projecting that. But sometimes the difference, if you project 618 and it comes in at 589, which is what the seniors were, sometimes it can tell themes and stories, and it probes a bit more of like, how are we off? Let's say 100 kids in one grade. How's that possible? So I think this shows some of the deep dive that we do into this to try to figure out kind of where our students are going, if we're losing them, or if we're getting increases in students. Is it because we're offering, a full day 4K, which we do, things like that sometimes tell stories. So this year, the 78 students, it's spread pretty thin. In past years, it hadn't been. So this is kind of a new chart that I included the last 2 years. So. Okay, so that's the enrollment piece. So that, I believe, is the left side of your packet. Shifting to the right side of your packet is more staffing. So that's kind of how do we get to the enrollment projection, and kind of now this is how we use it, right? So our projected enrollments, what do we need to determine our staffing? It's projected enrollment, the board approved section size, kind of class averages for staff. That predicts our sections required, and then that tells us how many staff we need for those sections. So this chart,
The sheet inside that says projected enrollment by school.
hold that up. Kind of, yeah, thank you. So this, I think the best way I've come to be able to explain kind of the linear process is to kind of break it up in chunks. So the next 3 slides will just be kind of similar, but each one will add a little bit. So this table you have that Connie held up is in your packet. This shows you by school what their current staff is, right? So on the left is the school. The next column is their current staff. The next column is what was their projection for this year, their third Friday enrollment, and their projected enrollment next year. And so the best way for me to, I think about it is Franklin has 11 staff. That was because we projected 223 students. Their third Friday enrollment came in at 227. And their projected enrollment next year is 243. So Franklin was staffed for 223 students. Next year, we're projecting they're going to be increasing by 20 students. So when you think about that, they're going to be moving up. So Franklin likely will need another teacher, right? When you look at where they're at now, plus 20 students, likely will need another teacher. What gets confusing sometimes is, let me give a good example here. Like Mitchell. Mitchell's a good example. Mitchell currently has 13 students. We projected them, staff, 13 staff. We projected them at 289. Their enrollment came in at 258. And the next year's projections at 264. So some of the conversation sometimes goes, well, we're increasing by 6 students. Do we need another teacher? But you were staffed to have 289. So you're actually down in terms of what we projected you to be in terms of staffing. So the story, it's not as easy as what did we have this year? What do we have next year? It's what did we project you to have? And what did you actually have versus what do you have next year? So it's a little more dense than just what did I have this year? What do I have next year? And things like that. So. Okay. So how do we determine section size? So the section size is board approved. And so this really helps kind of derive into the open enrollment seats, which we get into in a second here. So, our elementary and our secondary planned class maxes, the max per student in a grade is different than our 92%. So in 4K, we have a max at 20, but 92% of 20 is really 18, removing the decimals, right? Kindergarten's 22 at max. That means at 92%, it's 20. So we plan at the 92%. So you can see our averages across the schools. We plan at an elementary school, the building average at 22, because if you take 18, 20, and then 22 across until you hit 4th and 5th grade at 25, each building will have an average of no more than 22. And then if you factor in AGR and things like that, each school has a number of sections where they're 18 to 1. So almost all of our elementary schools are well under 22, if not high 20s, low 21s. And that's the picture for elementary. And then secondary is a little more straightforward. Max at 30 and 92% of 30 is 27. So those are the numbers we use to determine section size. So ultimately, the number of sections dictates the number of staff you need, which is kind of where we go next. So this, if you look at the first 4 columns, you've already seen the first 4 columns, and I've added on the next 3 to kind of keep telling the story of how we get to this, right?
So it's the sheet that just has all yellow at the end.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
So reading program.
So this picture shows kind of, the analysis on required sections. So won't dive too deep into this right now. The next couple slides are do a better job, I think, of telling the big picture here. So Franklin has 11 staff. Projected enrollment at 223. Our third Friday enrollment was 227, so it was pretty close. We're projecting 243. And the students per section here, I think we're missing the next slide here. This is not including AGR. Okay. So what we're saying here is that Franklin, and this is a little confusing. So the elementaries here are allocated a certain number of AGR dollars. And so each school uses those in multiple ways, but one of the ways is to reduce the class size and number of sections. So Franklin in this situation is going to have one AGR teacher, I believe. Let's maybe just go to the next one here. This does a better job. Yeah, I think this is better.
So the next sheet has the pink on the end, just for visual, so that you can find out what sheet.
Yeah. This is the better one, I think. Yeah. Including the AGR. Yeah. So this is probably the best way to look at this here. So each of the schools, we operate off the projected enrollment. So we'll go through Franklin's again. Franklin has 11 staff currently. They're projected at 243. So like I said before, the required sections with AGR in orange shows Franklin at 12. So they're going to be increasing by one teacher, 11 to 12. With what that means though, is that 2 of their staff are going to be AGR related, 18 to 1. So you can see in orange, Franklin's going to have 12 teachers. Their average building wide will be 20.3. Then if you look at, well, if you take out the 18 to 1, what's the average of every other teacher besides the 2 that have 18 to 1? So it's 10 teachers because 2 AGR less the 12 is 10. Removing the 2 at 18, removing the 36 kids out, their non-AGR sections are at 20.7. So you can see that like the building at 20.3, well, that's kind of like you're watering down the coffee, right? Take out the water. How strong is the coffee? Well, it's 20.7. That's kind of the thinking here. And you can see that going down the elementaries here. So Hoover has 18 staff currently. They're going to need 17, likely because their enrollment went down a little bit, which it did. But you can see Hoover's building average is at 20.4 with AGR. Without AGR, it's at 21.08, well under 22, as I mentioned before. You can kind of move through the whole story. The last column kind of shows you the change in staff. So as you look down the very right column, you can see Franklin, we're projecting to go up 1, Hoover to go down 1, Horace Mann to go down 3. Part of that is, remember in the budget approval, we talked about spending some carryover dollars for AGR. So some of the schools ran a few staff over because they were spending those dollars down, because Horace Mann's a good example of that. They're projected at 381 and they're projected next year at 382 is the same, but that's the reason. You can see the Horace Mann's building average without with AGR's 20.1 and without is at 20.67. So their enrollment and the staffing analysis is well under where we would want it to be. So you can see it, the elementary is the orange or the yellow columns, and you can see at the bottom it's black because our secondaries don't have AGR dollars. This is a lot. Any questions on this? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Not for me, but I got 2 texts here from people that are watching it virtually. And they say these charts are really blurry and they can't read them, and they wanted to know if there's some place, like, is this on a website or?
Yeah, we'll have it posted tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Hopefully they are listening to that.
Yeah. We'll have them posted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think, yeah.
I was gonna say, there's a huge jump at Franklin, right? Of adding on 9 teachers.
That's because Lane's closing.
Oh, there's a lane. There you
Yep,
go. Thank you.
Yep. Good question. I should have mentioned that. Yeah. And some of the schools you can see, Jefferson's going up 4, Pershing up 3. It's the schools that are taking on.
Walker, yep, I know.
schools. Yeah. Yep.
So that's why we left them on there so that you could still see that those schools are feeding inside their
Yeah,
schools. So we left them
gotcha.
in yellow, so you'd see that there are staff there that are going to be consolidated inside their buildings.
Other questions? I have a question.
I would not.
AGR dollars, are they attributed per school? And it's based off of
The free introduced rate. for the
free introduced
students.
rate at that school.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the dollars actually follow the kids. So the students going from Longfellow to Jefferson, those dollars would now be assigned to that school. Same with Pershing and things like that.
So this will allow some schools to have more AGR classrooms than
Yeah.
others,
Mhm.
because that obviously has a direct correlation to
Yep.
student achievement.
Good
Just the
question.
Point. I just want to make sure that's clear. So people are like, why aren't you putting more money here, there?
Mhm.
Literally has to go to wherever those students are attending. You
Yep.
can't say, okay, we have all this free reduced lunch students, but these schools could use it more, so we're gonna put it all and make sure that half the classrooms are AGR, or something like that. Can't do that.
It's by school, yeah. Mhm. Yep,
Mhm.
good point. Thanks, Deidre. Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Can you repeat that? just
Yeah,
so
so AGR dollars are one assigned by school based on the number of students who attend who are considered by the state of Wisconsin free and reduced
Mhm.
or low socioeconomic, and they can only be used in kindergarten through 3 grades.
kindergarten, third grade, okay.
So if no other questions on this slide, we're going to jump into kind of how does that information translate into open enrollment seats? And so this is also in your packet.
Well, last.
And so, and what we'll do for the website, for the people listening, what we'll do is we'll print this off and post it as a PDF. It's easier to see. The presentation is blurry. That's why we printed these for you tonight too, because it gets a little hard to see. So this table that you see, really, it's everything that we've been talking about for the first 15 slides, and I'll just walk through the kindergarten. So 4K, the 92%, the average we're looking for is 18 in a class. Across the district, we're projecting we need 23 and a half sections. Well, the question you might have is how do you get a half a section? Well, some schools do 4K kindergarten splits. So you'll have a full-time teacher that does 4K in a kindergarten. So it's like half 4K, half kindergarten, right? So then 18 times 23 and a half is 423, right? Our projected enrollment's 388. So then what we do is you just take 423 less 388, and that gets you all the way to the right to the 35. So that's kind of where the projections come. They lead into, how many we could take 423 4K students before we be full, right? Anything past that we could not take. So as you work down this chart, you get to grades like you go to 6th grade, right? Our average in 6th grade is right around the closer you get to the plan max, the less students you can take in open enrollment. That's the way the system is set up. And it really, what it does, the perspective, I guess the thinking behind it is we staff to the number of students we have, and anything extra we fill with open enrollment seats. That's kind of how we've done that. And that's the process. We would not be adding teachers to add more open enrollment seats, which is kind of past practice and led to, some issues that we had financially. So that's kind of what we've been doing. So as you follow that down, like in 6th grade, we're very in intermediates, we're very close to the 27, if not right there. So you can see that band in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we have no seats open because our projected it kind of exceeds that capacity a bit. And that's kind of where that goes. So the last point I'll make here is you might look at this and go, well, Aaron, in 11th and 12th grade, our capacity does not exceed our projection. So how do you have seats open? And that's typically because we've always opened seats for students who've been with us forever, who are looking to come back and finish their last year or two. So at this time, we have a few students that are left that are like on waivers that would like to come back, and we reach out to those families, let them know to apply and make sure they have a seat. So this number 183 is well down from past years. That's not a surprise to me. That's consistent with school consolidation. Becoming more efficient gets you closer to your averages that we look for. So the more efficient you become, the less seats we're naturally going to have. So.
One question.
Yep.
What is the accurate data? What's on the presentation or what's on the sheet? And I ask because it says here 2 open enrollment seats for 4th grade on the handout.
I know, I noticed that there's a typo. That's my fault. I'm sorry. I think I printed this and then that's my fault. The 2.
No, that's fine.
The 2 is inaccurate. That's my fault.
Which one's accurate? I'm sorry.
The 2 is, the presentation here is accurate. The 2 is inaccurate. So
Okay.
I'll need to fix that.
Nope,
That's my
perfect.
fault.
That's-
I just understood as I,
Thank you.
Yep. the 0 is correct.
Oh, in 3rd grade.
So,
I
Yeah,
didn't catch that in 3rd
Oh, was
grade.
it 3rd or 4th?
yeah, it's 4th
Wonderful.
grade. So that's my, as soon as I flipped the page, I noticed that. So
Nope,
Yeah.
that's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to confirm.
that's my fault.
And that's all I have. The only thing I will say is that the last thing that can impact this is we haven't had second Friday count. I believe that's this Friday.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's another count through the state, which is how we get,
More data.
yeah, it's the revenue. It's not the revenue limit. It's for the aid for the state. So those numbers are another good pulse point for us. You know, we do daily tracking of enrollment and try to do more, you know, bi-weekly at this point. We're usually, you don't see many changes mid-year, but it's a good pulse point for us. So this last table that you see could change a bit. It typically has not, but if it does, and we do have it changed for when we come back for looking for approval, it would, if it is changed, we'd come back with data around here's why. And that's kind of, you know, the thinking. So. But that's all we have. So any questions?
Questions?
I wanna just layer into this a little bit about some of our internal conversations. So with declining enrollment, right? So you see a net reduction in the number of teacher positions that we would need, even though we're consolidating schools, there's still overall declining enrollment. And we have a policy on the books, a reduction in force policy that we work through to identify teachers that would then get preliminary notice of non-renewals. But our internal conversation is really given how challenging it is to find teachers, to find qualified teachers, to find certified teachers. Is it wise for us in this environment to actually lay anybody off at all? And so we may come back asking for a waiver of the policy for this year. And allow us to simply kind of work through normal attrition, so that we wouldn't actually, we still will probably need to move some teachers. And so we would still use the reduction in force to identify which teachers maybe would be the ones likely to move out of a building that's being reduced. But we know we'll have places for teachers. So just so anticipate that we may come back asking, but we need to get through a couple of these additional steps in the second Friday count to make sure that we're not overcommitting in the budget, but at the same time, we don't want to lose people that we know we're going to need, you know, at the end of September. So just anticipate that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good point to make. And really, I think when you look at this slide, the very far right column is the change by building. There's very few buildings that have, you know, a high number to reduce. So, you know, having one person leave a school, you know, for retirement or a move or a resignation, is something that we historically have seen. So, you know, yeah, a good point to make, Marty. Okay.
Questions?
Thank you for all the information and the hard work.
Yes.
Well,
Clear.
I have questions.
Oh, sorry. Well, I still thank you.
Absolutely.
Questions don't mean that I don't thank you. First question is about the DLTA. I
Yes.
see that we're cutting that staff in half. From what we have, is there, and we're looking at our projection of, you know, under 100 students there.
Mhm.
Is there any particular reason why we're going that route? Are we expecting a change that limits what we can and cannot do there? Is that why?
So they currently have 6, so we're cutting it by a third. So the 2, they're down to 4. That's the current analysis based on the projected enrollment.
Okay.
So, but in general, you know, we haven't really seen many students in the district decide to keep the enrollment increasing. So one of the recommendations that we're talking internally about is maintaining their unlimited seat capacity and seeing how that tracks. And similar to Marty's comments before about not implementing the reduction in force allows us to kind of hold, you know, and allow people to have positions, and that may be in a school, not at the virtual school, but in general, we haven't, you know, they've kind of maintained this 90 to 100 level of students at the school. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But
Okay.
Yeah.
So your plan would be that if there was extra teachers that we kept because we didn't use the reduction in force, and there was more students in the DLVA, that we'd get assigned to that.
yeah, because I mean, if we opened up unlimited seats and for some reason that 85 went back to 120, we would need the 2 staff too. And then those, you know, additional, I guess, students would allow us in the budget to maintain having 6 people there. And so that's kind of where we're at with that. That's kind of an unknown though. It's uncharted water a bit for us. But yeah, kind of hard to predict, to be honest.
So what's the rationale, I guess, from going from 102 to 85? Is there that many seniors?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then when we're making the calculation for the staff, I just want to make sure this is clear.
Mhm.
We're basing that calculation not on 92%, but on 100% projected enrollment.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
That was a little
Yeah.
92%, 100%.
Yep, absolutely. I can elaborate a bit. So if we have a school with 100 students, right? We'll staff for the 100 students. But if we have openings, right, for open enrollment seats, it's based on the 92% of the planned max. So we plan for a secondary school classroom to have 27 students in it, knowing that it can have 30. But if we have only 25 students in that class, we can take 2 open enrollment seats, not 5. Because that gets us to the 92%. So it's a good question. Yeah.
And then lastly, when we have these projections, and as we see, they're simply projections. You don't know if people move.
Yep.
More people come in than we expect in one school, one neighborhood school versus another.
Yep.
When that happens, when it's identified that we have more, what it becomes a pain point for the staff at that school, right? They have some staff members are going to all have at the upper or above of what our quote unquote average is for those classes.
Yep.
What sort of flexibility, and I've asked this question before, what can we do to be able to alleviate that? Are we posting positions then to try to fill it? Is there maybe alleviation from the not doing reduction in force that we could assign staff to those schools? Because I know that happens somewhat regularly where there's certain maybe grades in a school which end up with a higher amount of students than were projected. And so maybe the overall school, projection is correct or close, but in 4th grade, they just got way more than they were expecting to get.
Yeah. So there's kind of 2 different points to make. So yeah, on a school lens, right? The numbers you see tonight might lend you to ask this question. And much of that question, at least maybe not for you, but so other board members thinking that is, you look at some schools where you go, well, geez, Walker, 206, 252. A lot of that's because if you were brand new 4K and you were going to go to Madison, we let you go right to Walker this year. There's no reason to have you enroll in Madison, start a whole year, get to know the school, and then move next year. You might as well go where you're going. So that's some of that. By building, so it gets a little more tricky by grade and classroom because the principal and the school-based administration builds a schedule. Connie now and me formerly, we would build scenarios to show them different options to do that. But ultimately, each school has different priorities around. Some schools do split classrooms, some do not. And so how that enrollment comes in, the schedule can either restrict that or it can allow for more flexibility in that. So schools that, for example, schools that do split classrooms, they're going to have more options for a 1st grade kid because they won't have 3 teachers doing 1st grade. They might have 5 because they might have a 4K or a kindergarten 1, 3 that do 1st, and they might have 2 that do 1, 2. So that does happen to your question, but that some of that, I guess my answer is some of that's up to the principal and the school to decide what they want to do with their schedule.
So the principal could, we base this off of what our number of sections are, how many students I think we're going to get. And the principals of each school is kind of making a plan based off of that. And then as they're seeing that enrollment come in, they may adjust or not based on what that actual number of students in each one of those grades might
Absolutely.
be.
And so some of we're going to have a similar discussion on Thursday with the principal cabinet about this leadership team. So some of my suggestion to the principal and leadership team is when staff leave for the summer, it's I'm doing 1st grade, and you can almost commit to that. But the better suggestion might be you're going to be doing 1st and or 1st, 2nd and or 1st kindergarten, but you'll be doing 1st. You know what I mean? Because then it allows you to allow the staff to be able to, take the summer plan, make preparation, things like that, but then also not, go, hey, you're doing 4th grade now. It's what?
Right.
Yeah. I need some time to get my head around that. It's difficult to do. I couldn't imagine. I was a math teacher. If I came in and they said you're doing calc, not algebra 1, I'd be like, okay, it'd be difficult, but having a range, honors algebra, I could probably do that, so, but yeah.
Okay. That concludes my questions and my questions for any additional questions from the rest of the board. Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time and effort on this as always, and we'll look forward to the final count once we get second Friday count in, and
Absolutely.
approval will be
The 23rd.
23rd.
Yep.
for the board for action. All right, so that is the only workshop that we have this evening. So at this point, what we need to do is adjourn. I need a motion, a second to adjourn this meeting, and then we need a motion, a second to move into a committee of the whole.
Second.
Right. All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye. Opposed? All right, so we're adjourned, and then do we roll call for going to committee of the whole? Yes. So a motion and a second to move into committee of the
Move
whole,
to convene into committee of the whole.
Second,
and then Suzette, can we please have roll?
Yes. Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Byrne,
Yes.
Ms. Lee. Yes. Mrs. Carr,
yes.
Mr. Sickett,
Yes.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Ms. Deal,
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes. Okay, so, okay, yeah, Mr. Reamer's there. Did you have any? Nope. All right. So,
Right away.
just briefly, as a reminder for the board, if you didn't remember, this was something that we were supposed to go over before the break. We had some late meetings, and so we did table that to now, and so we thought this tonight was a little bit lighter, so we could get it taken care of. So, Ms. Raymer, if you want to provide any other introduction.
Of course. Good evening, everyone. So 5722 is about school-sponsored publications and productions. And currently, we adopted a policy on May 24th of 2021 around this. And then Suzette asked me to review it with committee. And so it came with, as you guys have seen, quite a lengthy set of instructions when you actually review this policy. So we put it on delay for a little while because I needed to make sure we were really reading all of these options and vetting them. And the more we talked about it at committee, we had some questions over whether or not we still want it to be determined as a non-public forum. And so the three options you have within this policy are to identify yourself as a non-public forum, which means that you are providing specific oversight to anything that is a school-sponsored publication. And that means it goes under a review and you're ensuring that it has for content as well as grammar and all of those other pieces. Then there's a limited public forum, meaning that you can provide oversight in a limited manner, but not to every single publication that goes out. And then there's an open forum or a no oversight on our end at all, a public forum where students could publish whatever they wanted as part of a school project or whatnot, and it would have little to no oversight from our school district. And so we had quite a healthy debate about this at committee, which one of these was really more applicable to us and some of the work that we're doing as a school system. Part of the challenge is the way that you define a student-sponsored media or student-sponsored publication. And so our current definition is that includes both student publications and productions. Student publications shall include any written materials, including but not limited to banners, flyers, posters, pamphlets, notices, newspapers, playbills, yearbooks, literary journals, books, t-shirts, and other school-sponsored clothing, as well as materials in electronic or online form, including but not limited to websites, web blogs, video and audio clips, newsletters, announcements, transmissions by email, wireless broadcasting, or other similar distribution and dissemination. And then it goes on to explain what a student production is, which their definition is far more related to theater productions and things like that, music productions. But given the number of public demonstrations of learning that we are doing based on students exploring their interest, we are not. The disadvantage to being a non-public forum is then you have to have a regular committee for review for every single thing that a student is putting out, because we are really putting those out as, by our definition, a publication, really, and a school-sponsored one. It's part of a school course. Right. And so there's some in the language on the policy, it sort of says, if you're doing this, it leans towards a non-public forum, which kind of aligns to a bunch of what we're doing. If it's required for a class, if it's graded as part of a class. But then there's a whole section in the guidance about the preference around a limited public forum or a public forum. If you're encouraging students to take their individual opinions on things, if you're trusting students with some of their publications, if you are encouraging their opportunities to exercise free speech, and a lot of the things that we really are promoting as part of our work in our school district under our deeper learning work seem to start lending itself to not be a purely non-public forum and perhaps being a limited forum, a limited public forum, or a public forum, right? So there's three kind of graduated levels. And as a committee, we sort of lent into being either a limited non-public forum or a public forum, as we really have encouraged some of the, students learning their own values and beliefs and expressing those at school, assuming it doesn't violate another policy and still under protected speech. So not hate speech or other things that could go out and about. And this came up actually one time when Noah was at a school, a public demonstration of learning, and some students they were creating utopian societies. And some students had put some things that were pretty exclusionary on their list of reasons. And his question was like, well, do we allow that? Right? Because it was expressing some pretty strong beliefs one way or the other. It wouldn't have been deemed a violation of somebody's First Amendment rights. It wasn't hate speech or something like that, but it was a pretty strong opinion that really didn't align to our equity beliefs. And the question was, yep, there's oversight by all the teachers and all of those sorts of things, but we really are trying to push students, as long as they're doing it in an appropriate way, to discover their own beliefs and express their own opinions. And so we did follow up with the teacher and went through the whole process with that teacher. And the teacher obviously reviewed everything before it went out, but that was what the students wanted to promote as part of what they were creating as a society. And so that's really where the question is coming back to. And the guidance on it, the extensive toolkit, which is the first time I've gotten a toolkit for a policy before, but the extensive toolkit we got in it also highly recommended that you make this decision as committee of the whole versus one individual committee making it. So while we felt pretty confident as a committee where we were leaning, we thought it was better to bring it back to committee of the whole. The one disadvantage if you stay to a non-public forum is that the guidance is you really do have to have very regular and consistent oversight over every single thing students are putting out there, because otherwise you're potentially discriminatory, where you're only reviewing it for certain groups or certain things, but you're not reviewing it for other groups or other things. And the verbiage for me on the advantages of the limited public forum were when it talked about the trust in the students and the ability to try to develop some independent thinkers and how they view and see the world, right? As long as it's not hateful or discriminatory against other people. So that's really where the discussion comes in for the board on where they would like us to lean with this particular policy. And then the level of oversight, if we go limited public forum, means that we could say, elementary things are all, screened, but there's some latitude as you get older. You can choose kind of when you're going to provide oversight or when you're not, as part of how you're doing your policy. So thoughts?
So just for the committee members, you said there was some consensus. So was the committee for limited? Was the committee for a completely
For limited.
Limited, yeah.
Okay. So I just like to have the context.
Mhm.
It's the committee has spent time with this and you guys had discussions on it. So committee is for limited for the purposes of the flexibility it provides without having to have onerous oversight of every single thing that may be coming down the pipe that we want our students to be participating in.
Yeah, just given the volume of things that we were doing. The other thing committee asked for was then some guidance for teachers, just around when they're giving directions around projects and things like that, that we're sure that we are making it clear, right, that what our expectations are as far as what they're putting out or where there is a line, right? That's part of what we want our students to learn, but we'd love them to learn it before they cross it in a public forum, right? Before they cross it in a public demonstration of learning. It's part of the learning process.
Okay. So discussion questions, anything that you guys have after looking this over? Are you comfortable with using the limited public forum as the option that we go with for this policy? I presume the committee.
They had this lengthy discussion, so yeah.
Yeah, I think after the explanation, that's kind of where I was leaning to even before you indicated that's where the committee was leaning. So I'd be on board with the limited.
Okay. Joe, you're right.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I liked being pointing directly towards the First Amendment and a little bit of civics combined and being mindful and kind of really very intentional about how the policy would be adopted. I think it's really nicely written. A nice way to think about it.
Okay. Mr. Sikich, any?
Nope.
You're good. Ms. Lee?
No, I'm good with it. My only concern was just, you just always got those that like to push the envelope and,
Mhm.
And right away,
Mhm.
I hate to always be the Debbie Downer, but right away, think of those moments of that one kid that's gonna just try and push the envelope and ruin it for everybody else. But then, as I was looking and, like teacher had said, with the guidelines on it and making sure that those are explained and that you've got advisors that are overseeing and explaining that to teachers so that the students are aware that, it is not a free-for-all, that there is still guidelines that must be followed. That was just the only thing that made me a little nervous, but otherwise I love the idea of them being able to exercise their opinions and, and put it out there. So no, otherwise, yeah, I'm good.
It's really no different than what teachers are doing anyways.
Mhm.
This is just, I feel like if we went to where it was, everything had to go through a committee or a forum, it'd be a logistical nightmare and just things would not get done. So.
Well, and just you want to make sure then that your, limited public forum says you're allowed to have oversight over certain things, but
Yeah.
not oversight over everything. But a non-public forum means you're really saying that we're having oversight over every single
Mhm.
thing right before it. And given the way the definition is written of those student publications with our portfolio website, with those public demonstrations, we're just doing a lot more of this than probably your average Joe school district is doing, which is a good problem to have, right? That our students are out presenting to local businesses, that our students are at the WASBO convention. But so far, I haven't reviewed every single thing that they're going to put out that day. Right? Because we've trusted them. They've been working on this for a long time and certainly they've been working with their teacher, but the students will have the ability to speak freely that day and kind of share their ideas on this time it's on student-led businesses, right? Nobody questions it when it's that. It's when it goes into that territory where people have differing beliefs that we tend to want more oversight. But so that's where why the committee leaned that way. And again, it says in the guidance that the primary argument in support of a limited public forum is that it demonstrates a respect for the First Amendment and a trust being extended to the members of a student body who are involved in publications or productions. And that to us felt pretty in line with the rest of the work that we are trying to do here in West Allis.
Mr. Burns, anything?
Good.
Okay, so it seems like we're in agreement to go with the limited public forum as the option for this policy. We could take action on that tonight and it's got to sit for 30 days, right? And we have to do it again. So,
And then there's a few things in this one that then when we go limited public forum, there's some options within the policy. And so we'll come back with a recommendation then.
okay,
As a policy. So I think as committee of the whole, you could make the recommendation that the committee come forward with its recommendations based on the limited public forum. I don't know that we have to do it again in committee of the whole, do we, Marty?
No, we'd be able to, right, if we take this as the first reading.
Yep.
Have the committee, then between now and the second reading or the final approval, right, make those recommendations.
based
Yeah.
on the options.
Right.
So I think it's an
Yeah,
emotion to
so then-
approve it as a limited public forum as first reading.
Yeah, we'll just go that route. then.
Yeah.
Good. So, any other questions or comments or anything? Without that, I'd look for a motion. I'm just gonna motion to approve it, to move forward with the limited public forum as the option for this policy. So I look for.
I motion to move forward with a limited public option for policy 5722.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? What?
Is it roll call?
I don't think it has to be a roll call for this portion of it. No.
Okay.
And then I would look for a motion to just, sorry,
Parliamentary, he can call for a roll call. Right?
do you want a roll call?
No,
Well,
I wasn't sure, but no, I just looked at it and I thought we had to do the yes or no. Something like that.
That's to get in it, to get into committee hall, we have to roll call. But right? We don't have to do roll call. We haven't done roll call for committee of whole when we passed it previously. Yeah, okay. All right, so as we've seconded, that was unanimously in favor, all right, and there was no dissent. All right, so then I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks very much.